Eastern time. So let's get this launched. I want to welcome everybody to our latest virtual Media Monday. And today we have Dr. Andrew Dunn to take us through media fandom in the era of this COVID-19 response, this strange world that we're living in. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Dunn.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. Thanks, Don, for asking me to do this. This is one of those areas where my interests are now kind of crashing into reality. So we've got, everybody talking about their fandom and the stuff that they're doing when they can't go outside and they can't be with other people. And so I'm been really interested in research on media, on fandom and media fandom and whatnot. And so this is right up my alley. So this is fun to talk about. But before we really get too heavily involved in the COVID-19 thing, I think it's important to kind of understand the terminology of what we're talking about here. So when we say media fandom, what we're really talking about is fandom that is the recognition of positive, deep emotional connection to mediated element of popular culture. That's what Duffett defines it as. And what does that mean? Well, it just means that, look, we have fandom sometimes that is geared, that is attached to things that we love in the media, and this started almost immediately as soon as mass media came about. When we came out with the phonograph, people became, fans of phonographic music and records and getting together and listening to do things like that. When film came out, people, rushed to theaters and became avid film fans and would fill theaters to watch their favorite films, sometimes, multiple times. And then, of course, radio became the big one that really kicks us, gets the ball rolling, if you will, for the kind of fandom that we see today, because people were tuning into their favorite radio programs. They had their favorite characters. They had their favorite shows. And so, we've been doing this for a very long time. And of course, there's always been these subsets of fandom that come with that. So yes, you have media fans who are fans of novels, who are fans of, short stories, poems, whatever it may be. And then in that, you always had these subsets of people who are, well, I'm a big fan of fantasy novels, or I'm a big fan of science fiction novels. And as we progress from just the written word into these new forms of media, whether we're talking about radio, TV, film, now we're talking about online, we're talking about video games, and we start to see how fans have developed around these things. There are fans of TV shows, there are fans of movies, there are fans of music, there are fans of video games, there are fans of comic books, anime, you just, any aspect of popular culture, there's going to be a set of fans for that particular type of thing that's out there in the popular culture. And that includes sports. Now, one could say, well, being a sports fan is not really being a media fan, because, you can go live and watch sports. But I would argue most people don't experience sports that way. Most people, like you and I, experience sports through a mediated environment. We're sitting on our couch, turning on the TV, watching it through an ESPN broadcast or something else. And so it's a very different experience than going there and, being in the stadium and hearing the roar of the crowd and that sort of thing. But really, most of our fandoms these days are mediated experiences. We come to fandom a lot these days through mediation of either the broadcasting technology or computer technology or what have you. And so it's a really kind of an interesting way of thinking about fandom, is that media really drives most of fandom that you have today. So then we have to stop and think, well, okay, well, what is media? What does it do for us? Well, if you think about it, the most primary thing that media does for us is it informs us of what's going on, right? We turn on the news and it tells us what's happening in the day. It also kind of helps us understand, not only informs us, but helps us understand what that means and what's going on and what that means for us in our lives. And it kind of shapes the way we think about the world around us. And of course, there's a lot of culture that is transmitted through the media. We learn about our own culture, and we learn how to be a member of our own culture through watching media, right? And so all of that is kind of the most quintessential function of media. But when you get out of that, you start looking at other functions of media. What are the other things that the media does for us? Well, one, it provides a massive amount of entertainment. And right now, as we're all stuck inside the house with COVID-19, we are constantly looking for entertainment. We're looking for things to make us feel better, to get us out of our boredom. Some things that we'll talk about a little bit later as we move on. Another thing that it serves as a function of is sets up for us these characters. And when I say characters, I sometimes refer to characters as in like fictional characters, but also characters in terms of real people who become in and of themselves media characters. And we call that parasocial interaction, this feeling like somebody in the media, this feeling like, yeah, if I'm watching The Office, I know Jim, I know Pam, I know, Michael, I know Dwight, I know these people. Of course, you don't know these people. They're not real people. They're actors, and you don't know the actors at all. But you have this sense, this weird sense that you know who these people are. And so media fosters that. It allows us to have that kind of interaction with these characters, even when it's real people. So I point to like the Jordan documentary that started last night, and some folks have been, tuning into that. Michael Jordan is a real person, obviously. He is a real, live, living, breathing person, but he is also a media character. He is somebody that we think we know because we saw him on TV playing basketball, or we saw him in Space Jam, the movie, or we saw him, in a Hanes commercial, whatever it is. We know him, as this media character. And it's interesting that one of the things that Jordan expressed concern about was how people might view him as a person after watching this documentary, because suddenly it's a different side of this media character we thought we knew, right? And so he's concerned about that, because not only is he a real person, not only is he a media character, he's also a brand. And so every time you pick up a pair of Jordans, you're picking up Michael Jordan's name and everything associated with that. And so he's concerned about his brand, he's concerned about his legacy, and all of those things. I would argue, if you're watching a documentary, you probably are already at least interested in the guy to begin with. So there you have it. Another thing that media functions as, it gives us an opportunity to escape the mundane real world life. And as I'm talking to my students about, one of the earlier studies in this area is looking into basically bored housewives sitting at home, cooking, cleaning, taking care of kids, things like that. And what researchers found is that the radio soap operas became a big outlet for a lot of those women, because they had very mundane lives, sometimes, just really boring lives. And so the soap opera gave them a really nice dash of drama and excitement, and a way to escape the mundane lives that they were in. And of course, that continues today, and we still, see people who are in those predicaments do use media to kind of escape their situation. Another thing the media serves as a function of is anxiety reduction, right? It just, can just ease all of our tension, especially in moments like we're in right now, where there is a lot of really concerning news. There's a lot of death going on. There's a lot of concern about, what am I going to do from here, and how am I going to live, and, what about this and what about that? And so sometimes it's just nice to, turn on a favorite show and just kind of ease the tension a little bit, and let that back off. And then another function that media allows us is to kind of play. We can, in terms of like video games, we can actually play, right? In terms of, other situations like video games, we can role play, we can kind of take on new personas and things like that. So it gives us an opportunity to do a lot of things beyond what we can do in the regular world. On the flip side of that, if that's what the media functions as, then what's the motivation to go into that meeting? Well, you'll see that they pair up pretty nicely with some of those functions. One reason people turn to the media is to learn, right? We just want to learn. And right now, tons of people right in the middle of all of this are figuring out, well, how do I bake a loaf of bread? Because I can't find any bread, or I can't find the kind of bread I like. So, I can't find any sourdough. So what can I do to make sourdough bread? So people are turning to, YouTube videos and Google and things like that to find like, how do I do this? What do I do? Or I just bought a whole bunch of, chicken and beef and things like that. Now what do I do with all this, right? So people are using media to learn. So there's a lot of motivation to try to learn new tricks and new things. And of course, people who have been laid off might actually be turning it for actual learning to, get certified in a new piece of software that maybe will help them get a job later down the road. Another motivation is habit. A lot of times we just do things out of habit. So why is it that some people come home and flip on, The Office or Judge Judy or whatever? It might be that, they really enjoy those things, but it also might be just, it's been habit. You just at 4 o'clock, I turn on this show and I just leave it on the rest of the night. Or sometimes I just turn on the TV just for the white noise or whatever it may be. So there may be some motivation that's just purely out of habit. One of the sadder aspects of media motivation is companionship. A lot of times people will turn to media for that feeling of companionship, that I need to reach out to another human being. And no more prevalent is that than in this particular case, right? If you have people that cannot leave, that cannot get out of the house, then the next best thing is turning to media to look for that companionship. This is particularly true and has been true even before we got COVID-19 for the elderly. We do see the elderly oftentimes turning to media for that companionship as family members move away, as family members die, as friends die, then the TV becomes more of a friend than what we've had before. Another reason we turn and why we use the media is for just out of boredom. We just need that arousal. We just need that excitement, something to, break the monotony of every day doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then of course, that's where sports comes in. Sports is very dramatic. It's a very conflict heavy endeavor. And so there's always going to be a lot of drama built into sports. And so we oftentimes will turn to sports for that drama, for that excitement, for that, that just edge of your seat suspense, right? And so that's part of the reason why it sucks so bad right now for a lot of us who are sports fans, because we don't have that. We know the outcome of every game right now because every game has already been played, right? And so we lose all of that that excitement that is tied into sports that we like so much about it. Of course, as we talked about, if media can function as an outlet for relaxation, then obviously some people will go to media for relaxation, and they certainly do. Whether it's listening to some chill music, you want to listen to some Marley or Ben Harper or, whatever it may be, or you just want to watch videos of the waves rolling in and out on a beach. Sometimes we just turn to media because we're motivated to I just need a moment, just chill. I just need to relax. The same thing, escapism. If media can offer us opportunity to escape, then obviously some people are going to go for that opportunity to escape. Some people are going to turn to the media to escape their life and to get away from it. And a last motivation that can be sometimes wrapped into the escapism is this idea of diversion. Sometimes we have projects due, we've got papers due, students, we have tests coming due, students, right? And we know we should probably be working on those things, but I don't want to think about that right now. And so we turn to media as a diversion from those things that pile up and just keep calling that ever-pressing weight on you just keeps getting bigger. And so one way you don't think about it is to not think about it. You just find something else to do. Of course, media can also divert you from other things that might be really, good for you, like exercise and things like that. We'll talk about that in a second. But there are a lot of different reasons people turn to the media, and there are a lot of different things that media can do for us as we look at that. When we think about why someone turns to something or something not, a lot of times it's about selective exposure. We sometimes turn to things because we've almost been conditioned toward it, right? We start to, for instance, associate a particular TV show with a positive outcome, right? And so we select that entertainment because we anticipate that positive outcome, and that keeps us coming back over and over and over again, right? So what happens is that we become very expectant, right? We think like, look, I had this really good experience with the show before. I think I'm going to have that same experience. And so we keep coming back. And so if you're starting to say, okay, well, I can see where somebody might start binging the show, because if it gave me the positive that first episode, it's going to give me the positive on the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth. And suddenly you're just spending all day. And so, you know, what happens is you get that repeated exposure over and over again. What's interesting in that, and what happens with that, is that, yeah, people do experience that, but then sometimes storylines change, favorite actors leave, and then suddenly you're not getting that expectation anymore, right? I like using The Office because I think once Michael Scott left, The Office just kind of took a nosedive, and then people don't even want to watch the last couple of seasons of that because it's just not exciting anymore. It just doesn't have the same feeling. It doesn't feel as positive as it did, whatever it may be. And so those things can be disrupted. It is possible that, you know, you could binge watch a show, but maybe you only binge watch to a certain point. And then at that certain point, you just go back to the beginning and keep going to the things that you like and avoiding the things you don't like. Another reason why some people might, you know, go for one media versus another is mood management. A lot of times what happens is people can, you know, get into a certain funk and they want to get out of that funk. So they turn to media to try to, you know, break the doldrums, bring them out of this unpleasant state. And so they may turn to media to try to change things or turn things around. At the same time, you know, you might want to keep a good thing going, right? So you might be in a really good mood and you want to stay in that good mood. And so you're just going to keep watching the happy, you know, comedy stuff, keep the good times rolling, if you will. And same thing, if you're really stressed, you may turn to the media to try to relieve that stress. So a lot of managing of moods can happen with media, which again explains why somebody might binge watch some show that makes them feel really good for a long time, because it keeps them in that state and keeps them in that really positive state as we move forward. It is interesting, though. Most people will seek out media for pure enjoyment, for the seeking pleasure, right? You turn to a TV show or a movie or whatever because you want to derive pleasure out of it. You know, it's hedonism, just seeking out the pleasure of it. But we actually have found through research and through, you know, self-reported, what people tell us is that some people actually turn to media for what we call eudaimonic experiences, which is we are deriving not necessarily pleasure, but we're deriving some sort of positive experience from things that, in all honesty, probably shouldn't give us any pleasure at all or shouldn't be a positive experience. So it explains why people might turn to you know, nature shows, really violent nature shows, or people might turn to, you know, documentaries about the Holocaust and things like that. And they will watch these things, even though they don't give us pleasure in a typical sense. They do give us this overall feeling of kind of experiencing the human experience, just seeing what it feels like and seeing those other aspects of it and kind of feeling and expressing empathy for and these things. So sometimes we don't have a good explanation for why people like that. It's just there may be some other mechanism going on that goes beyond just pleasure and why people might turn to something. But for the most part, mostly what people are going to seek out is going to be, you know, entertainment. It's looking for things that are fun, that are positive, and keep us in those good moods. It's interesting, though, because some people will look for things intentionally, and sometimes people will find things kind of accidentally. You know, the Tiger King has been all the rage these days of what, you know, people talking about turning to Tiger King and why people would turn to a show like that. In all honesty, a lot of people probably turn to it because, I mean, how are you not? There's a dude with a tiger, and there's, you know, it's murder, madness, mayhem. It's the train wreck effect. So you look at it and go, oh my God, I just have to see what this is about. And you watch the first episode, and then suddenly that leads you to the second episode and the third episode. And then now you're like hooked, and now I got to find out what happens. I need to know. And so sometimes you have this intention to sit down, I'm going to binge watch the entire, you know, third season of Parks and Rec. And then sometimes you're like, I'm just going to see what this train wreck's all about. And then you can't turn away. It's got you. And so you keep coming back over and over and over again. So what is it that keeps us there? What is it that makes us stick with it? Well, for people who are in the writing world, in writing scripts and things like that, it's good to know that having really good character development and having really complicated and good plots is really a good way to keep people coming back, right? Because what we find is there's a phenomenon known as transportation, where a person becomes really immersed or kind of transported, if you will, into a narrative world. And that can happen through a book, it can happen through a movie, it can happen in a TV show. And so it's a lot of vivid mental imagery of what's going on, and the narrative just kind of keeps going. Traditionally, we talk about it through novels and things like that. So when people read a book, what keeps them reading the book? What keeps them going to the end? But it can easily be translated to other forms of media where you're really just swept up into the story, into the narrative, into the character, and you just keep going on for the ride. And that's part of the reason, again, why people like the binge watching, because yes, you do escape to this world, but it really feels like you're there. Another thing that feeds into that transportation and that character development is character identification, where we start looking at a character and we say, I just like this character. I just like this protagonist. Like this somebody there's just something about this person that I just kind of want to follow their story. I want to see what happens with them. I'm rooting for them. I'm cheering for them. And when good things happen to them, I'm really happy. And when bad things happen to them, I'm not so happy. And I want to see justice served to them when something bad happens. So a lot of times it's the identification with the character. Maybe you like the character. Sometimes it's wishful identification. Maybe you want to be like that character, and you say, I want to follow this character because I want to be like that. I want to try to kind of bring in some of their personality into my personality. Again, parasocial interaction and parasocial relationship, that feeling like this person, like they're a friend of yours, also folds into that. And then a lot of times what happens that keeps people in the narrative is that we start in our heads seeing things from that character's perspective. And so we'll see a side story and we'll say, I wonder what our main character would think about that. I wonder what they're going to do about that. And that right there is really a strong identification with the character, because now you're not only thinking about the character, you're thinking as the character, you're thinking like the character. And so that's just another way of bringing you into that narrative and sweeping you into that narrative. There are some related facets of that. And honestly, researchers really should do a little better job of nomenclature and figuring these things out. And you'll have researchers that argue, no, it's this and no, it's that. But there are a couple of other things that are out there that also build into this. One of those is presence. Presence we oftentimes think of in virtual environments, like this idea of you're here, but you're also there, right? You're here on your computer playing your video game, but you're also mentally there in that virtual environment. And so the more you're there, the more enjoyment you're getting out of it, and the more experience you're getting out of it, and the more this world just kind of cuts off, right? And so you get so absorbed in what's happening and you're really enjoying yourself that you just this world kind of melts away. And it really facilitates that escapism, which is part of the reason why gamers, and weren't really going to talk about video games too much, but I do want to talk about it a little bit, because when we think about video gamers who are jumping into a virtual world, especially the more equipment you put on, the more you put on the headsets, and even if you've got a virtual reality situation where you've got the head enveloped, the more you get sucked into that world, right? The more you are there and not here, and as a result, right, you really get sucked into the narrative, and before too long, you notice, oh God, I've been playing for 8 hours straight. Very similar to what happens with binge watching TV, right? You look up and go, oh my God, I've watched 8 episodes. It's been 8 hours and I'm still watching. Or sometimes Netflix will kindly ask you, are you still watching? Are you still alive? And you go, yes, stop judging me, right? Same thing can happen though with video games. Is you get sucked in that world, right? And you just keep playing and playing and playing, and the world around you kind of goes away. Another aspect, something we call flow, that builds into that as well, is this idea of getting lost in that activity, and you really are getting a lot of enjoyment about what you're doing. And the reason why is because what you're being presented with is a little bit of a challenge that meets your skill. And as long as the challenge is in line with your skill, you're going to keep at it. And that's why video games are so, inviting, is that you typically will level up with your video game. So you'll play your game, and then your skills will get better, and the game gets a little harder, and your skills get a little better, and your game gets a little harder, and that keeps you moving. It's just like a stair, right? And you just keep going up the stairs because it's getting harder and you're getting better, and it's getting harder and you're getting better. And the moment we throw the controller across the room is when it gets too hard and we can't play anymore and it's driving us crazy, or it's just too easy and we get bored with it and we walk away. And so there are a lot of reasons why we stay where we are. There's a lot of reasons why we stay with the media and why we keep it going. And a lot of it has to do with kind of mentally what's going on. Now, this has led to a lot of people doing some pearl clutching and hand wringing about, oh my God, is this a good thing or a bad thing for us? Some have likened binge watching to be sort of like a pseudo addiction, not a real addiction, sort of like an addiction where you get this steady stream of dopamine, right? You're getting all this good feeling and it just keeps coming, right? And the reason why it keeps coming is you keep watching. And the more you watch, the more good feelings you keep getting, and boom, 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 boom. And that leads to sort of like an addiction. I would argue it's probably not an addiction. It's probably just you just getting habituation and you're just getting in there. But it is a concern. Is it something that I think we need to be very concerned about? And probably not. Now, are there people personality wise that might have some problems with being able to step away? Yes, I think obviously. But I wouldn't say by and large. I don't really get into the market of saying if something's good or bad for you, but I do say that it's something noteworthy. It is something that's happening. It is something that's going on in your brain. You're getting this good feeling and it's continuing. And just like anything else, maybe there's too much of a good thing. One thing that is a concern, though, is particularly as we talk about kids and obesity, is the more you're doing something, the more you're not doing something else, right? So if you're playing video games for 8 hours a day, or if you're playing, watching Netflix for 8 hours a day, then what are you not doing? You're probably not exercising. Maybe you're not doing things socially, blah, blah, blah. And so, that becomes a little bit of a concern with people. When it comes to sports, as I said, one of the things that we're missing out on right now, and Don and I talked about this, Don's a big Cubs fan, is that, we're missing out on the excitement that comes with sports, that anticipation of the season and all of this stuff. In sports, we have this thing called berging and corfing. Berging is basking in reflective glory. Corfing is cutting off reflective failure. And what happens is when your team is winning, you get to bask in all that glory. Oh man, it's called berging. Oh man, it feels so good. My team's winning. We're just number one, blah, blah, blah. When your team's not doing so well, then you're like, oh man, then you're just cutting things off. You're like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. I'm not wearing my hat today, whatever it may be. Right now, because there's no sports being played and because we know the outcome of every game because they've already been played, it can be an okay time for people who have really storied teams that with really, great success. And, you can go back and bask in the glory of, the Chicago Bulls in their heyday, and you can enjoy the Jordan documentary because you love Jordan, the personality, and you can just really bask in all this and enjoy all this. But if you're, I don't know, like me, an Orlando Magic fan, you'd rather get back to the season because we're still in the hunt, and maybe, just maybe, something good will happen as a result. And I don't have anything. All I have is us falling short time after time. And so I don't have that, right? I can go, as an Alabama fan, I can go look at Alabama, or as a Buccaneers fan, I could go watch our one Super Bowl victory, but, I'm more interested in the anticipation, which I'm not getting right now. So it can be a feast or famine situation, but for most of us, we miss the games themselves, the anticipation, that hope of basking in reflective glory. And so, yeah, it's rewatching championship games and documentaries and things like that is great, but we're really missing out on that excitement that's built into the season. And particularly for those of us who have teams that aren't, as storied as some teams, then you're really missing out on next year, right? And not to rub Cubs faces in it, but you guys have had enough success recently that I don't mind bringing it up. But for many, many years, Cubs, it was next year, right? And so we all kind of understand that if your team's not, the team that's been winning every year. And so we're really missing out on that. Sports and other media fandoms are very similar, though, because they involve us being a fan, engaging in fandom as being really the most enjoyable outlet for our entertainment. Feeling like our lives would be a little less, not terrible, but our lives might be a little less without the fandom, particularly right now, right? And that just the escapism that comes with sports, and similar to fashion that we see with other fandoms. And so while other fans can really deep dive into their fandom because there's all kinds of shows and books and comic book, for sports fans, man, we are running dry. We're turning over the stones to find anything to really get excited about. And that's why, even fans of people who aren't fans of Jordan are like, I'm watching this documentary because it's something new, right? It's something different. It's something we can talk about. It's something that's almost like watching sports. And so there's a really an interesting dynamic that's going on there with sports fans. Fandom, though, in general, has always been driven by the collective nature of fandom, right? You're not a fan alone. There are sports teams that, that have that motto, you never walk alone, right? You feel like you're never alone when you're a fan. And that's true of this. And right now, going to the comic book convention or going to the stadium to watch a big sports game, that's one of those things that brings us together as fans, and none of us can do that right now. And so that's what is a little hard for us. And so these situations, going to the comic book convention, going to the stadium, those are almost like religious pilgrimages. And in my book, I've got coming out, it's a book on fandom, and a chapter in the book that I talk about, I call it Comic-Con Communion. And for a lot of people, their fandom is built on this idea of going to the event to be amongst their people, right? To wear the costume. And yes, wearing the jersey is a costume. You're cosplaying. Sorry if you thought you could get away with it and be a sports fan. I'm not cosplaying. If you're wearing that jersey, you're cosplaying, folks. So you're going to an event and you're cosplaying with all your other fans, and you're enjoying yourself. And we're all missing out on that right now. So what do? Well, we turn to the technology that we have, right? We turn to Zoom, we turn to Skype, we turn to FaceTime, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams. Did I leave anybody out? Right? And we turn to those things so that we can kind of be alone together, right? And so we host watch parties. And certainly there are going to be watch parties, for instance, for the Jordan documentary series. There are going to be watch parties for the NFL draft. There are going to be watch parties for people watching, the Harry Potter series together or the Avengers series together. People are going to host these things so that they have just a little taste of that fandom that they're missing out on right now. Because while fandom can bring us through this, the ultimate goal and the hope for all of us, right, is that we get to go be fans, not alone together, but actually together again, right? In the stadium, at the Comic-Con, at the local theater, whatever it may be, right? So that's where we are. And that's what's driving us. That's what's giving us that sustainability through where we're going through now. And that's what gives us ultimately the hope of when we get on the other side of this thing, that we all hope we're going to get there. So, any questions?
Yeah, I'll ask one quickly. And first of all, wow, a lot of that sure hits home. How do you think, like, who knows what the normal or new normal, whatever that's going to be that we get back to eventually, but how do you think that's going to impact fandom? Like, do you think that, I don't know, is it going to have a greater appreciation? I'm not quite sure what I'm trying to say here, but what changes do you see?
I think for a lot of things, it's going to be, at least at the very beginning. I think people are going to be rushing out. People are going to go to minor league baseball games. They're going to go to, the school production of plays. They're going to literally go to anything they can just to get, it's going to be a monumental release of energy, pin up energy. Everybody's waiting to just go out, and even just to go down to the the bar and have a beer with another person. You know, there's going to be a lot of anticipation of just let me out, let me go do something, right? And so yeah, for fans, I mean, that's going to be huge, man. Just to get out and to be amongst your fans. I think you're going to see a lot of ticket sales if it happens. And see, that's the other, you know, we don't really want to talk about that, but you know, there's always that possibility that summer drags in and fall comes in and we don't get any of it, and that we're still dealing with this. So if we can be hopeful and say that, yeah, those things are going to be available to us and we can go do them, then yeah, I think people are going to be going out and, you know, T-ball and damn near anything they can do to just experience something with other people. Yeah. And maybe not take for granted that the next time there's a, you know, a comic book show in your town, or the next time you have that opportunity to go to the ball game with somebody, that you go, because you know, you never know when you're going to be in a situation like this again and you don't get that opportunity. So I would imagine, Don, you probably got some Cubs games ready to be planned and ready to go, right?
Yeah, we've already had to cancel one planned trip because it's
Yeah.
just not going to happen. But you know,
Well, let's hope it opens up for the rest of us, for
Yeah.
the rest of the year, right? Any other questions?
What do you think about the opposite? So like Don was speaking for, you know, when this is over, like sports, like events, people are going to be like running, like racing to get back to those. But what about sports like e-games and such, like probably prospering and doing better now than they were before? You know, you think that, I guess, media is going to lean more towards that just because of the success that's going on now? Do you think we'll see more of that on TV?
Yeah, I think that's going to happen no matter what. But I think you're right. I think this pushes it that much more into the forefront, right? The esports has gotten huge. I mean, if you look at the money that guys are pulling in for winning esports championships, it puts to shame some of the professional sports out there. I mean, you're talking about sponsorship. You're talking about millions of dollars, not thousands, millions of dollars, being the top gamers. And these huge promotions and the huge events, these Super Bowls of games, video games. So yeah, I mean, I absolutely think that this kind of situation is going to push that and push it into the forefront. I think we'll see a lot more of it on TV. I think that's going to be another, push going down the road. Will it supplant or replace the previous? Probably not, but you know, I think it'll be I think there'll be a healthy rivalry, and I think you're going to see a lot of people say, you know, if I got my choice between, again, not to pick on baseball, but the 129th game of this team versus that team, or I can, you know, watch the esports championship, then I might turn over the esports championship. You know, it just depends. But yeah, I absolutely think this whole situation is going to push people more and more toward esports and the potential of esports. And it is fascinating. You know, you watch these competitions, and you know, I really like the idea of the actual players playing the game. You know, like the actual NFL players playing Madden NFL, or you know, the actual soccer players playing, you know, FIFA or something like that. I think that's really interesting too. And right now NASCAR's doing that with the virtual race car driving and stuff. It's, you know, it's an interesting situation, but yeah, I think it's going to be bigger and bigger.
Some of the drivers have ran into trouble with that. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that much as well, let's go back to parasocial interaction. You know, you have a favorite driver and you think you know who that person is, but do you really know who that person is?
Yeah.
Right. And they are both a real person and they are a media character. And the media character is very crafted and, you know, kind of it's a creation, right? It's a manufacturing of a person. And those situations where that person is no longer being kind of tended to, no longer being watched, no longer having somebody in their ears saying what to say and what not to say, and the real person steps out, then we all get a glimpse of that. And sometimes that's going to be really ugly. And I think that's exactly, again, obviously very different situation between, you know, the NASCAR situation and the Jordan situation. But I do think that's part of the reason why Jordan is concerned about this documentary, because people know Jordan from the smiling guy who's, you know, selling his shoes or, you know, selling Hanes underwear, or in Space Jam, or, you know, sometimes we've almost forgot that, you know, Michael Jordan also played basketball, right? And he was a massive trash talker, right? I mean, he said some hurtful things to people out there, Muggsy and Mutombo, and some of the things that he said to folks. And that was just what he was doing on the court, and we actually saw there was a lot that happened in the locker room that we didn't see, you know. And so I think that's part of his concern, is that you're not going to get the mediated creation of Michael Jordan. You're going to get more who Michael Jordan is as a real person. Not that he's a bad guy, but, you know, he's very driven, he's very competitive, and people who are very driven and very competitive, you know, sometimes they push people, and sometimes they punch teammates.
Nowadays on social media, a lot of celebrities are being more vocal about different things as far as politically and just otherwise. Do you think that's going to have an impact on the whole stardom type, you know, oh, they were my favorite person, and now it's like, oh, don't watch any of their movies, boycott, blah, blah, blah. And
yeah, I mean, some of that yes, and some of that no. When you are a celebrity and you make a political stance, you know, that there's probably going to be only one or two ways people are going to see that. They're going to be positive for you, or they're going to be against you. And some fans will rationalize their behavior and say, I'm okay with this because I love anything they do. And some fans are going to say, no, I don't like this person anymore because of their stance. And, you know, that's something that happens. But most you'll find is that a lot of celebrities are very coy about their politics. They're very coy about the kind of controversial issues. They skirt around controversial issues. Or on the flip side, you have some that just delve right in, and they have been since day one. I think for the celebrities who have always been outspoken, continuing to be outspoken is not going to be going to be a problem for them. You know, they're going to continue to be that person. For the people who have never been outspoken on anything, and they've just been, you know, I'm just selling a product, and that product is me, and that's all they do, then the moment they start getting political, then it's going to be a little bit more tricky. Where you do see some interesting situations kind of shaking out is where people have, you know, been haven't spoken out in the past, but now are becoming more outspoken, and that transition, and that tough transition for them and for their fans, and deciding what we're going to do with this now. You know, I'm thinking like the Taylor Swifts of the world, and even, you know, say what you will about you know, the Kardashians, but you know, they've made some political stands too, and so we start to see some interesting shifts, and you know, it's weird, but the person that was dogging you 2 weeks ago suddenly rallies behind you because they pick up a political idea that you like now, right? And so that's another fascinating thing, is how quickly people can suddenly go from being the people you hate to the people you love because they took a political stance that you like. So I don't know, it's fascinating, but this world of celebrity influencers and fame and things, it's fascinating what that does to people and how that moves and motivates and shapes people.
We've seen a lot of people who, for instance, haven't ran in 12 years, and now they're buying Pelotons and they're using YouTube to work out. Where does that behavior come from?
Ooh, well, I think part of it is this idea, this hope, this promise, right? That here's another thing that's gonna make it easier for me to achieve what I ultimately want to achieve, which is to be in shape and to stay in shape. And so, you know, we go through processes, and some of which I've talked about in class. You know, we go through these processes of pre-contemplation. We're not even thinking about it. And we contemplate it. And then we start making preparations to do something about it. And then we finally pull a trigger and we do it and we buy the Peloton and then we start doing it and we start on the road. But it's that maintenance that sometimes is the problem. So you spend the 2,000, 3,000, whatever it is now for Peloton and the programs and all the associated things. And you get that and you get it home and you're all excited, you're all jazzed and you're doing it and you're doing it. And then, you know, you're like, oh, I got that Zoom meeting at 2:45. I gotta go to, and well, I'll do it later today. And then, you know, that becomes the next day, and then that becomes the next day. And then, like so many other forms of exercise equipment, it falls by the wayside and sits. I think people like the idea of it's like a gym in my home, right? I've got somebody, you know, encouraging me, goading me in some cases, yelling at me in other cases to keep going and that sort of thing. And that's cool if that's your thing, but there are going to be a lot of people that buy this and hope that this is the new ticket, and you know, it just turns out not to be, right? You know, diet and exercise is hard. I'm living proof of it. It's not easy to do because it requires maintenance. And well, you know, I can do it for a few weeks. After a while, I get tired, I get bored, I get, you know, start to hate the person on the Peloton screen, whatever it may be, right?
Do you think the huge popularity of it right now is just because it's so much more available through media?
Yeah, I think it's just a hot trend. I think it'll be, you know, it's the same thing with Nordic Track before that, and Solo Flex before that, and Bowflex, and, you know, I could name 100 products that have come before. This is another one. It's nice, it's fancy, it's cool, and, you know, part of the commitment that people make to it is because of the amount of money that you spend on it, right? It's not cheap. If you want to buy it, you're going to have to shell out a serious amount of dollars for it. And if you do that, then you feel kind of like you're committed to keep doing it. There are a lot of exercise gyms and things like that that are built on that same idea. You spend a whole bunch of money on it, you're probably going to be more motivated to keep going because you've already spent a whole bunch of money on it. Because you don't want that guilt of seeing that bicycle in the side of the room just laying there when you put your dirty clothes on it, because we all do that eventually, right? Always becomes where we put our dirty clothes, or we put our clean clothes before we put them in the closet, whatever it may be.
In terms of sports, we see like more athletes being creative with their content.
Yeah.
They've changed the type of content they're giving out. Like they show us their workout routines every day and that type of thing. Like we get to see the behind the scenes now in terms of content with these athletes. How do you think this translates into character identification in terms of being fans and all that type of?
Oh, I think it feeds it, right? The more behind the scenes stuff that you can see, the more you're going to feel like you know this person. Like, oh, they have the same TV I have. Probably not. They have the same, you know, they have the same shirt that I have, or they like the same kind of chips that I like, or they eat the same breakfast cereal that I eat, or, you know, anything like that. You start glomming on to anything you see in connection with that person, that just builds that relationship, in sort of the faux relationship that you have in your mind with this person. And then you also see them as being very endearing because you start to see their humanity, right? If you haven't seen, there was Shaq's kid was just dogging Shaq the other day because he said that Shaq named his boat Free Throw because it would never sink. And I was like, oh, that is so cold, but it's so funny. And it's funny to see Shaq being joked on by his kid because he's the dad joke now, right? He's the dad that we make fun of now. He's not he's not Shaq. He's just the guy that has kids and we make fun of and stuff like that. And I think that's an endearing quality to Shaq. I think Shaq has built an entire career on being, you know, kind of the butt of the joke frequently and being okay with that. And that just makes people like him even more. You know, it just builds on his popularity. And I think he's got a new reality show that's out now. And certainly those kind of things from his kids are feeding into that reality show with the idea that if you like that, you're going to see more of that when we go forward and see all these things. right? I remember the one that always blew my mind out of the sports world, but was Ozzy Osbourne, and Home with Ozzy Osbourne. Because growing up, Ozzy Osbourne was this mythic, Prince of Darkness kind of character, and then you see him like fumbling around trying to open a DVD at home with his kids, and the very real, his discussion with like his addictions and his problems and the problems, and you're just like, this is so weird, because you're not that guy up on the stage anymore. Now you're just some dude with kids, and like it just, and I think those kind of things actually foster more like of those people. They like that feeling of seeing the behind the scenes, and I think it just builds on people's fan bases.
Another question? Well, I was waiting. I have one more. During this whole thing, sure, I certainly miss friends, I miss family, I miss all the face-to-face, but I've kind of been able to adjust, and fill in where we can, with the Zoom and what connections you can make.
Yeah.
But I found myself, and it's almost a feeling of guilt sometimes. The thing I miss more than anything at this time of year, and have not been able to fill that void really, is baseball. I mean, that's been such a big part of my life. Every spring, it's like, this rebirth. And of course, for years and years and years, being a Cubs fan, it was never a pleasant experience, but it has been.
There was always the promise, right? There was always the promise. This was your year.
And 2016, that came, but that part of it never, of course, I wanted them to succeed, but it was just the, watching that and having that as part of my everyday life, from April to, well, recently into October.
Hopefully October, right.
Yeah. And I don't know, but, and it's almost, I thought, wow, of all, there's thousands and thousands of people, being really sick and dying from this. And I think, wow, the thing I miss the most is baseball, and I don't know. I wonder if that's.
I mean, what can you do about your, it is a huge part of who you are, it's what you love. It's, fandom shouldn't be something that, should be felt bad about, or should be hidden, or should be, something that we deride people for having. I mean, fandom is what drives, Jordan and Kobe and Shaq and LeBron. Fandom is what drives them into the sport to become these people that we, so beloved. And same thing with baseball players. Not everybody gets to do that. Obviously, you can grow up a baseball fan but not end up playing baseball, and that's fine. But fandom isn't something that should be taken lightly, as I guess is what I'm really saying. It's a huge part of who we are, and it's something that that binds us, that builds community, that fosters community among us. And it's something that we put a lot of love and effort and into. And so when it's gone, there's a sadness to it. There's a, it's something that we can miss. And it's okay to both be sad that people are losing their lives, and sad that you're missing out on connections with friends and family. But I would argue that a lot of your connections with friends and family were built on the fandoms that you have. That a lot of the friends that you're missing are the ones that you watch baseball with, right? And so, or a lot of the connections that you have with your family were to talk about baseball. Same thing with my dad. I talked to my dad every Sunday during football season about how, the game the day before went. And so that's a huge part of, our relationship. And so when we have those kind of relationships, any part of those relationships that are missing is tough. And especially when a lot of relationships are built on, things that we have in common. Fandom is a huge part of that, and it's an important part of it. And so I don't think anybody should feel bad because you're missing out on your fandom. It sucks. Yes, people dying also sucks, and sucks much worse than missing out on your fandom. But you have room enough in yourself to recognize both losses and be okay acknowledging that, you do have a sense of loss, that you do feel like I'm missing out because I'm missing this thing. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
And it's just weird because I mean, sure, we've had strikes and things like that before where
Yeah.
we, lost some of our sports for a time, but
Sure.
we've never lost absolutely everything all
Right.
at once. And I
No,
think we
we're-
just weren't built for that. I mean, just
Yeah,
because
we're in totally new territory. This is all new, and we're all trying to figure out. I mean, it it just makes me laugh thinking about what they must be thinking at ESPN. What do you do when you literally just don't have anything to show? So you show old games, you show documentaries. They are just loving the fact that there's really nothing else on except the Jordan documentary, and they have been hyping that thing for weeks now, talking about it. And so this is their Super Bowl moment. This is all they have. And so once it's gone, there's really nothing else on the docket. But I'm sure they have other documentaries they can release. There's other things that they can put out there. But until we get the live thing back, they're going to be trying to figure out, what do we show, what do we do, how do we keep this ball rolling, and and we may see a lot more. Here's the 1995 World Series, and here's the 2004 Stanley Cup, and here's the we're just going to see a lot more of that until we just run out of those things, and then we just start them all over again. I've always loved watching old boxing matches, so if they throw those on, I'm liable to I'll at least watch a few rounds of it because I'm a sucker for it. But it's not going to be everybody's thing, but you'll get a few of us.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought ESPN cashing in on Jordan yet again.
Absolutely, yeah. He is a huge brand, and he continues to remain so. It's really, that's actually, Jordan is a really interesting character because, what other great can you think of that has had this kind of longevity? And you could say, well, it's because he's the greatest. Kareem might have a different opinion about that. But the point is, we don't even entertain the idea of anybody else being greater because he's that much of an icon. And it's almost blasphemous to suggest there's anybody even close to being as great, or if not greater. It's very similar to the way we felt about Joe Montana in football until, this guy Tom Brady comes around. Again, I'm really hoping football season starts. As a Tampa Bay fan, I am really, really wanting to see Tom Brady play for Tampa Bay. So I'm missing out on it as well. So.
Well, I hold out hope you're going to get that. So.
I'm always curious. Yeah, I'm excited, but who's the mastermind behind holding these clips and saying, "Hey, we're going to keep these for 20 years," and then
yeah. Well, in Jordan's case, a lot of it was he didn't want to release it. He was really
right.
he was not okay with putting it out there. He just kept fighting him on. He just did not. And again, I think a lot of it was he was concerned about what it was going to do to his image and what people thought of him. True basketball fans are going to remember him, making the free throw with his eyes closed while talking trash to Mutombo, and he's going to remember him, saying derogatory remarks to Muggsy, and remember that he punched Steve Kerr. People were going to know that, though. But for the vast majority of people out there, they don't know those things about Jordan. They just know Jordan from Space Jam. They know Jordan from Hanes commercials. They know Jordan from posters, and they know Jordan from Nike, right? So they know a very small sliver of who Jordan is. And I think he was genuinely concerned about it. But then again, based on all the things that we've seen about other players that have come out after that, including Kobe Bryant, I think he probably looked at that and said, look, if we can go that deep on Kobe, then what's the big deal about a documentary about me, right?
Right.
And probably after his death, it would have come out anyway. So there's that other thing. Might as well make some money on it while you're still alive, right?
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, we've crossed over the 2:30 hour, and so I guess we should wrap this up. But Dr. Dunn, I want to thank you very much for a fantastic conversation as we continue to navigate these strange times. So really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And thanks for everybody tuning in. All right. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.